Scopes are pretty much useless now. For years, there has been a better tool to monitor and understand your colors. When you start using this better tool, you'll create better grades because you'll start to understand your color better. Your skin tones will be much more accurate because now it's really easy to fix them. And you can easily match clips together objectively. And so much more. So can I show you a tool that makes all the scopes outdated and share the theoretical understanding which most beginner and intermediate colorists lack that prevents them from adopting this better method to objectively understand their color. Did you know all color grading softwares are actually 3D modeling softwares? Well, in actual 3D modeling softwares like Blender, Houdini, Cinema 4D, etc., we work in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. These define the 3D modeling space. When we work with color, we use 3 dimensions as well, R, G, B. These define our 3D modeling space as well, called color space. This space you see in the vector scope and in the 3D vector scope very easily. This is the red channel, this is the green, and this is the blue. And all the colors of your video fall inside this space based on their RGB pixel values. And when you edit your color, you can see the color moving around, aka warping around the color space. All color modifications done in our color grading softwares are basically just warping this color space. And different scopes try to give you a different view to the color space. The reason why we need to do this is that human vision has an automatic exposure and white balance adjustment. Scopes were designed to bypass this subjectivity. For example, did you notice that during this explanation I just gave you, this video of me talking has slowly drifted towards a cooler tone? Here is the original, and here is where we ended up. And here are the vector scopes and the parade for the 2 videos for you as well. And here is our major flaw with the scopes, and that is, as you could not really notice the shift in color in the actual video, were you really able to see it in the scopes either? Some of you maybe could, but for most you might have not. And to be honest, we are just watching an extra image of the original video when we use scopes. Why not just watch the original image instead, objectively? So, how would that be possible when I just explained that our vision is very subjective? And that's where this new tool comes into play. If, for example, you want to check where does your skin tone lie, you can easily just move your mouse on top of the skin tone area and see the objective values directly from your skin, bypassing the subjective vision that we humans have. I can then make adjustments, for example, to the white balance of my image to get my skin tone to a healthy place. But here we run into the reason why this better method has not replaced the scopes yet. That is, do you really understand these numbers? What are they actually? HSL? Have we seen them somewhere before? By the way, I just realized that I've been making YouTube videos for 8 years. I started 8 years ago. And when I started my YouTube, I very quickly became full-time YouTuber. But then 2019, something happened and I stopped making videos for actually a few years. And that gets us to the paid partner of this video. This video is actually supported by BetterHelp. This is an online therapy service that I really think can help people like us, like you and me, like creatives. And the reason why I recommend this brand is that I have myself used them. Back in that period when I didn't quite upload that much, I had mental health issues. Nothing major, nothing life-threatening, but still something that really kind of like just stopped me making progress on making videos on YouTube and things like that. And I contacted BetterHelp back then, and I got like a therapy session right the next day. And I found the most amazing therapist. He was like this older man who was really kind of like not just asking these patronizing questions like, "How does that make you feel?" He was more like, "Hey, Jonas, I really see what you're going there. I know how you feel." Din 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 din. Like really like explaining me things like these are the next steps you're gonna go forward. And he was really like 100% correct. And that was a really good experience. So I recommend you to go and take a look at their service. And if you're not as lucky as I was with your therapist, then don't worry, you can always change the therapist and stuff like that. It's a really good service, and that's why I recommend it, because I've used it myself. I normally decline pretty much all brand deal suggestions that I get to my email, but this one I was like, okay, this is a good brand, I like it. So here's my link. You can use this to get the 10% off from your first month at BetterHelp. And then in the description of this video, there's like a thing as well. And thanks to BetterHelp, I can actually make this kind of content where I'm just teaching this theory stuff. So thanks BetterHelp for supporting this channel. Okay, so we were talking about these HSL values and how to actually read them and understand them. So let me explain this. But first, before I go to the HSL color model, let's go back to the RGB color model. And normally RGB color model is represented as this cube that is balancing on its corner. And then here I have this fancy tool that allows me to move these sliders, and then you can see the dot moving inside the color space. And this is how the RGB color space works. So if I put all of these to 100, the dot goes to the top. And if I bring them down, it goes to black, and so on and so forth. You can see how the different colors can be found, like all the colors can be found inside this cube. And that's how the RGB color model works. But we are interested of the HSL color model, because that is, I personally think, the most useful color model of them all. So there is 3 values: HSL, hue, saturation, and lightness. The first value, the hue, is an angle value. So it goes from 0 to 360. And you can see that now the colors, the dot goes around the outer edge of the color circle. And then the saturation defines the saturation, how saturated the color is. And then the last one is the luminance. And if I push this to 100, you can see it goes to white and goes black. And actually, in the middle of the color space, you can see the what I call the neutral axis of this color space. And it's the same in the RGB color model as well. In the middle of the color model, you have this neutral axis. So, and then there's a fourth term in this model, like a hidden term called chroma, that you need to understand as well. But before we go to that, let's actually look inside DaVinci Resolve as an example of a color grading software where you actually see this HSL model being used quite a lot. In DaVinci Resolve, we can find the HSL model in a few places. The first obvious one is the HSL qualifier: hue, saturation, and lightness. Well, I say lightness, but it's actually luminance. Sorry, I mix these up all the time. Another one is the hue versus hue, hue versus saturation, hue versus luminance curves. And after this video, you will understand these curves much better. Trust me, it's really worth it. And then we can find the HSL as one of the color models in the color warper tool as well. So here, it works. So next, let's start using the tool that I promised you in the beginning of the video. So you saw this floating window there, and then there's actually another version of it as well, and that's the bigger window here. And wherever I hover my mouse, you can see the values here, HSL there, and the same values HSL here as well. So for example, if I go to the very middle, if I can find the very middle, well, I can't quite, but anyway, if I find the very middle here, yeah, there we go, that's 0. Yes, there we go. Now it's in the very middle of this diagram. It's the neutral of this diagram, and the saturation is 0. And then when I go all the way up here, the saturation starts to go towards 100% saturation. And from the hue, you can see that this color's hue, for example, is 0. So that's pure red. And then the hue angle goes all the way around to 360. And this is basically how this tool works. We can see the objective values of wherever our mouse hovers. But you rarely want to measure this kind of a diagram. So let's actually do something practical and look into, for example, measuring skin tones. So here we have some skin tone, and let's say that we would have a reference. And even though this looks nice, we just like this better. Just play along with me. And with this tool, we can already go and measure, like for example, this is like the hue is 19, saturation is 35, and luminance is 63. And here, if we measure this, it shows us the hue is 27, saturation is 33, and luminance is 72. So the hue is higher, the saturation is lower, and the luminance is higher. So now if we would like to make this skin tone look like this skin tone, we could first take a kind of like our target, for example, place this about there, and then let's grab like a screen capture of this that you can do on Mac. It's Command-Shift-5. And then we get this image floating around, and this is now our target where we want our numbers to go. And let's put it there. And then let's start working with the skin. And for that, let's create like a skin tone node. Skin, and let's mask the skin. For example, there's many ways, but I'll just go with that. I'll use the mask view, black and white mask view. Then I'll just make this very narrow and target her skin, and then about there, I'll make it wider so it captures everything. Then let's soften it, like so add a bit of ramps, maybe play around with that, and maybe widen it with, okay, there we go. And then let's see if we can cut some dark hair away from the selection. Something like that. That's good. Even the lips are now not selected, so that's really good. And then a bit of denoise is in order. Okay, so now we have the skin nicely selected. And with this tool, I can place my cursor like about there, and then press Command L. It adds this kind of a look, like I don't know if you can see it in the YouTube compression, but there's this kind of like a cross there. And now I can bring this here. Let's make it a bit smaller so it's like there. And now we can start making these values the same as these. And for this, I would say that the best tool for now is the global wheel, because in this workflow that I use, we can use this as very accurately, like exposure and white balance and stuff like that are very accurate. So let's bring the, exposure down to have it about there, like 64 as well. About there. And we already are kind of looking nicer. But then the hue is still higher. The saturation is almost there. And this is actually interesting. The saturation, when we talk about skin tone, this is only about skin tone. And actually, let's make a YouTube video about skin tone later on. So subscribe for that. But for this, I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak peek about that. So when we talk about skin tone, the temperature slider is almost like the saturation, and the tint slider is almost like the hue. So if we want to add a bit of more saturation to the skin, we'll add a bit of temperature. So just adding a bit of temperature about like there. And then the tint is 23 and this was 20. So let's add a bit of magenta there. So about there. Okay. And it's actually 18 now. So that's the standard for skin tone. Like 18 is like the correct skin tone. But actually in reality, human skin tone's hue changed from 40 to -5 and all that. And in movies, depending on the grade and or the film stock or stuff, the hue can change a lot. But in this case, let's just trust our reference. So I put too much tint there. So let's bring that down slightly. And then let's bring a bit of coolness back so it goes from there. Okay. Now they look very similar. Okay. Let's free this lock. And then here, let's go full view and then this, and let's close this. I would say that we are very close. Maybe, I think there might be some slight contrast difference in the skin tone here. So we could slightly work with the exposure. So this is the one thing as well. The numbers are objective, but the, how would I say, the highest authority is with your subjective eye. So for example, this feels slightly darker than this. So even though the numbers are, it is the same, but if it doesn't look like it, that's the final authority. So anyway, that would be how we would work with skin, for example, with this tool. Okay, next challenge. Now there's two images shot in very different situations. And let's analyze them a bit with this tool. And then let's try to match the sky and the overall vibe together. So first of all, when we look at the highest values, here's 82 and here is 90, so that's higher. If we look at the blacks, we can see that this, the lowest here about is, if we can maybe zoom some way, it might be 9. And then let's look at the hair. Let's make the sampling smaller and let's look at the hair, and the hair is 28. So there's a big difference in exposure. And so we can already start working there. That's not any, like, that's not every, we can clearly see it already with our eyes. But anyway, so let's start bringing the exposure down. Something like this. And now if we look at the sky, you can see that the hue is here, like it's like 190 almost, like already 190. If we make this sampling slightly smaller, something like that, there you can see 178. And here we are actually for 43. So let's try and fix that. Let's add this lock somewhere there. And then I'm just going to start cooling this down to cool down the whole image. And let's see if I can make it even so cool that it would go all the way there. I can't with the slider. So maybe I'll just push it with this. And now we're starting to get somewhere, like that is 131. But I think the skin tone is getting too cool. So let's first just aim for the skin tone to look kind of similar. So instead of pushing it that much, let's just find something that looks kind of okay. And we can again sample with this tool. So it's there. It's like 17. So maybe slightly warmer. There we go. And maybe even a bit more, warmer. So I think that starts to be quite nice. And then let's make like a sky mask. And let's do this. Just select the sky. Let's use the, what is this? And here you can actually see how big of a difference in the sky there is. Like the hue starts from here and goes all the way here. So no wonder it's very difficult to match mask the sky. So let's try something like that. Maybe there, that's good. Okay, and let's just denoise it a lot. So we can make it the gradient smoother. And then here we can again lock this one. So we'd want to get the hue to be about the same as here. So 170, and the saturation is 6 and luminance at about. Let's make this trick again. Let's select this. Let's bring this up. So those are our target values. And then let's lock it somewhere. For example, let's try to get this area to be the same. So I'll choose this, I'll move it here and lock it. And then let's make this slightly smaller. There we go. And again, I'll work with just the temperature and tint. And let's push it more cool. And then maybe a bit more magenta to push the hue towards where we want it to be. Oh, that went too far. It's very sensitive there. And I think actually we need to push it even more cooler. So now that starts to be kind of in the same ballpark. Let's measure it again. So this area is about 178 and 7. And here it's 6. Okay, slightly smaller in, what is it, in saturation. The luminance is about the same. So, okay, let's hide this and let's look. And let's have them like the whole, like this both. Let's select both of them, and then this was before and this was after. And now we were able to objectively, just looking at the values, match these together. And luckily it was simple as that. We have the skin tone is, I think, well, the skin tone is of course darker here and slightly redder. So we could work with the skin tone as well if we want to match the skin tone there as well. But yeah, this is basically how this works. Okay, and then there's a bit more theory that I want to share with you because you've gotten so far. So this is my treat for you. Okay, so I told you that there is a fourth term, like an invisible term that you need to understand, and that is chroma. Let me explain how that plays along. So let's select a color. Let's, for example, go to 240, and that is pure blue. And there we go. Okay, this is not the easiest. Okay, there we go now. So let's imagine that we have a relatively high saturation, like really high saturation, 95%, and then a very high luminance. And now let's just save this as our color, and then let's make another color. Let's put this to 50, and then let's put this to 95. And so now we have two colors. And which one of these looks more colorful to you? And if you're sane, like I am, is of course the lower one looks, the lower exposure one looks more saturated than the high one. But the values actually contradict that. And the reason for that is that, so let's put them together again, is that when we are in the middle of the color model, we have quite a lot of leeway to move away from the neutral axis. So there's a lot of leeway. But when we are very high, for example, at 95, there isn't that much like space to move away from the neutral axis. And the same thing is when we're very low, for example here, there isn't much space to move away from the neutral axis. So that's why the chroma value is important. That the chroma is the kind of the distance from the neutral axis. And chroma can be highest when the luminance is 50, because then there's the highest space in the color model. And this is very important when you really want to dig into making cinematic color grades, where the image is like really saturated. But when you actually look at the values, they are not even like, they might not even be like highly saturated. It's just that they are placed in an area where there's enough space to move away from the neutral axis. And then a second interesting theory part is that I want to teach you a method of like a mental tool on how to understand the hue value, because it's kind of difficult. Like, of course, here it's easy because I can see the color, I can see what the hue is. But if I would just see the number, so if I wouldn't see if I wouldn't see the color, and that is that that this is an angle value. The hue is an angle value, and the angle is the same in the RGB model as it's in the HSL model. It's the same angle. And if we look at the color model from the very top, the same angle applies to both of these color models. So 0 is, well, kind of going straight to red. And then 120 is green. 240, about there, is, well, no, there. That is pure blue. And then again red. So when we only have the kind of value, the hue value, if you can only see this, we can already kind of fork the value between, if it's between 0 and 120, then it is between red and green. And right in the middle of red and green, there's at 60, there's yellow. And then, for example, if we have the number 18, for example, here, we already know it's between red and yellow. So here's red and 60 is yellow. So somewhere in between here, that means that it's between red and yellow. And because it's more towards the red than it's yellow, then, for example, the 18 degree is a warm red. And the same thing applies if we, for example, have a number here somewhere between 120 and 240. We can then like figure out like right in the middle of this. It's actually, let's actually see how much it's 180. So this is exactly between red and blue, and that is teal. So if we, for example, have a number that is like 230, so we already know that it's between 180 and 240. So that means that it's between teal and blue. And so then we can kind of like how would I estimate the color from there? And the same thing here. If it's between 240 and 360, then we can fork that it's somewhere between blue and red. And if it's just right in the middle, would that be, I think that would be then 320, don't quote me on that, that would be magenta. So if it's over 320, then it's between magenta and red. And if it's between 240 and 320, then it's somewhere between blue and magenta. So maybe like this kind of a purple color. So that is a way of you kind of like trying to make a mental note on what hue is what color. Okay, it's time to reveal this fancy tool. And this tool that we used is actually this. It's Ricky Adams' classic colorimeter. And the only place you can now get it is from his own website. So there's a link in the description where you can download this. So this is a standalone tool that you can then, when you install it to your OS on Mac, there's a Windows alternative, just a second, then you can use this in any software, Photoshop, DaVinci Resolve, whatever software you run, you can use this. And in this tool, you can choose like your different color models, and the HSL is my favorite, so let's choose that. And then here you can choose the sampling area on how many pixels you want to sample, if you want to sample just 1 pixel at a time, or then bigger. And then few other clicks, the tips. This one is like a hovering mini window, and you can find it in the window. And if you have this, you go and select mini window, then that appears. And that is very handy because you can minimize this and you can place this wherever you want in your user interface, and you can always kind of check like, okay, that's that color, okay, that's that color, and it's not intrusive in a way. And then there's other fancy things in this as well. As I said, if I press like Command L, it locks a color. If I use, for example, let's choose like I would maybe like this color here, I can press Command Shift H and it will lock it, and I can see the color there. I can copy the hex code from there, or then I can just copy it directly. And you can see all these, well, how would I say, these keyboard shortcuts here, so you can use them. And this is like, I just love this tool. It's very handy. I use it all the time when I'm doing graphical design. When I need to grab a certain color somewhere, I'll just use it with this tool. Unfortunately, this tool doesn't work on Windows. For Windows users, I have 2 options. First one is this instant eyedropper tool. That is this kind of a window. And with here, you can find the color model as well, HSL. And I've set myself a keyboard shortcut, Control Shift Win and V. You can make it more simple, and it makes this kind of like a eyedropper where you can go and select 1 pixel at a time. So remember, this doesn't kind of scale the sampling, so it's not as accurate. There's a bit more noise in the selection. And this is like a free software. You can find the link is in the description. Another option is Windows Power Toys, which is like a lot of different tools. And here in this tool, I have set like my color model HSL as well. And then I have like a different, different keyboard shortcut, and it looks like this. And then with this again, I can select like individual pixels. So this doesn't allow you to sample many pixels at the same time. But these are the best options for Windows. Okay, that was the end of the video. And thanks BetterHelp for supporting me making this kind of like full-on theory videos for you guys. And then there's my link in the description if you are interested of checking out BetterHelp. Okay, see you in the next video and subscribe to the channel.